Welcome back. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are, as we have told you all this hour, meeting behind closed doors in Alaska. The two leaders are discussing, among other things, the war in Ukraine and other issues Putin is sure to try to wedge into the diplomatic and economic conversation. Nancy Cordes joins me now from Anchorage, Alaska. Catch us up on what we know so far. Nancy?
Well, Major, here's what we know. The president went into that small meeting with Vladimir Putin about 2 hours ago now. They both had two of their top foreign policy advisors with them on the Trump side. That's Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his special envoy and longtime friend, Steve Witkoff. He also had an interpreter. And that meeting is still going on, which means that this could go on for a while. This could go into the night, because after this meeting, they're supposed to sit down for a meal. It was going to be lunch. Now it's more like an afternoon snack with a larger group that will include the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Commerce, and other Russian officials. At the start of this, Russian officials predicted that this would go 6 or 7 hours, and it now looks like that is a possibility. What we do know is that once it all wraps up, President Trump and Putin will stand at those two podiums behind me if things go well and do a joint press conference. If things don't go well, in other words, if Putin doesn't show a willingness to compromise, doesn't show a serious interest in a ceasefire, then President Trump says he'll simply hold that press conference on his own and head back to Washington.
So one of the things, Nancy, you and the assembled reporters, as I gather, there are a great number of journalists there to cover this quite historic moment. Among the things you are first going to look at is the stage and whether the two podiums remain. And there are other military advisors to the president. I was just going through some of the notes conveyed to us by Margaret Brennan and others who have been added to the president's entourage to give him a military perspective if things really get highly specific about Ukraine.
Exactly, because while Putin has said things that indicate that theoretically he'd be open to a ceasefire, when it gets down to brass tacks, he has always resisted. And he has issued a long list of demands of his own that haven't changed much over time. And most of those demands are non-starters for the Ukrainians and more broadly for the Europeans. He wants an entirely new government installed in Ukraine that would be more friendly to the Russians. He wants the Ukrainians to hand over territory that he has claimed, even territory that he doesn't currently control. And so the question today will be, does he give up any of those demands? That would be a sure sign that he is ready to see this war draw to a close.
Nancy Cordes on the spot for us, as always, whether here or on the road with the president. Thank you so very much. CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd joins me now. Sam, great to see you as always. Margaret Brennan sent us a note a moment ago talking to a top U.S. official there on site. How's it going, or what's the attitude? It's a toss-up, all up to Putin. How do you evaluate that?
Sleep tight, America. Well, in all seriousness, I hope that that's not true. Typically, heading into a meeting with not just a seasoned head of state, but a 15-year veteran of a foreign intelligence service, a president of the United States is going to prepare extensively and have a strategy for those meetings so that there's an even playing field. It is unclear what kind of preparations Donald Trump did for this meeting to avoid being exploited by President Putin. And it is a little concerning the longer these meetings drag on. Certainly, a restricted meeting between President Trump, President Putin, and their closest advisors is going to want to cover a lot of issues. But the longer that President Putin and President Trump talk, I am concerned that negotiations could drag on, and President Putin, who has a lot more experience in these bilateral restricted settings, could gain an upper hand.
And it has been said by many looking at this that what Putin wants to do is, yeah, Ukraine, and I want to add this and this and this and this, unrelated to Ukraine. And what President Trump and his advisors need to do is keep focused on Ukraine and try to get some specifics and some resolution there.
Well, and not just to get any specifics or any resolution, but to get good resolution. President Putin knows that President Trump has said since the campaign he could get a deal done quickly. So President Putin knows he could put a deal on the table. But, Major, the question is it a good deal? Is it a deal that is going to avoid us having a repeat of this in several years? Is it a deal that's going to allow President Putin to feel empowered to just roll through Ukraine for a third time and perhaps even further? So President Putin knows what President Trump wants out of this. And my hope is that President Trump consulted with some real Russia experts. I don't know who's left at the State Department with significant Russia expertise or on the National Security Council, but spoke with some real Russia experts to go into this meeting prepared with a strategy for how to handle Putin.
If my audience sees a headline that mentions the word ceasefire, what would you say to be cautious with about that terminology?
The terms of a ceasefire. What are they agreeing to stop doing, for how long, and who's verifying it? Putin has agreed to things in the past, and then he just blew through those arrangements. That's what President Zelensky alluded to in that famous February Oval Office meeting when President Trump got so angered. Putin agrees to things and then just breaks his promises. So we need to make sure it's a credible ceasefire with terms that don't just benefit Putin, but that also benefit the Ukrainians.
Sam Vinograd, always a pleasure to have you. Thank
Thanks,
you so very much.